Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, the next one in our series on the SilverLeaf Investment Fund. Thank you so much for taking the time this evening to join us. Very briefly, my name is Cliff Giesener. I'm joined by my colleague, Pierre van der Hoven, and we're excited to tell you tonight about some of the opportunities that we're looking at and some of the deal flow and who we've got in our pipeline. I'm going to jump straight away into the presentation. I want to run you through a little agenda for tonight's webinar. Please feel free to post your questions on the chat, and during the session we will try and attend to them as best as we can. And then right at the end, we will take you through the process of investing, and we'll summarize why SilverLeaf is such a great opportunity. Obviously, the tax year ends in 2 or 3 days, so please jump on the opportunity. I'm sure you've heard about the news that 12J is not continuing this beyond the sunset clause in June. We will address that in tonight's webinar and discuss what the implications of that are. But without further ado, I'm going to be sharing the screen and jumping into our presentation. Okay, so some of you might have attended our previous sessions. I really just want to revisit briefly what we covered in those sessions. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. It's really why cannabis is so attractive and why it's an incredible investment opportunity and also the fastest growing industry. We're also going to summarize again why South Africa is prime for cultivation and production. And then we'll dive into some of the investable companies that we're looking at that we're very excited about. We are chatting to many companies that have been brought to our attention. Pierre and I are both extensively networked in the industry and are aware of a lot of opportunities and companies looking for funding, and we'll take you through those exciting opportunities. Cannabis is one of the fastest growing industries, and it's growing on average at about 20% per year and has done for the last 10 years. It's legalizing around the world. There's more than 30 countries that have legalized it for medical use, recreational use. It's starting to open up. In fact, I was just chatting to Pierre a little earlier, and he was telling me that New Jersey has just legalized it in the US, and it's imminently about to be legalized federally across America, which is really going to open up the world's biggest market for it. And the stigma is changing. So it used to be obviously an illicit drug that is changing, and the plant is now coming out of jail. And we also have it on good authority that it's actually going to be deemed to be an agricultural crop, the hemp side of it. And that's obviously very, very exciting. There's also been a lot of activity recently, both here in South Africa and around the world in terms of listings. There was a listing last week of the first cannabis company on the London Stock Exchange. Distel here in South Africa recently bought into a CBD company, and a pharmaceutical company in the US recently acquired a very large cannabis company for, I think, $7.5 billion. So there's a lot of activity in the space. The cannabis industry is returning great returns this year so far, and the medical benefits and uses are being recognized. In fact, in December, the World Health Organization rescheduled cannabis from being a dangerous drug to having medical benefit. So that was a substantial milestone. And then there's also the extensive industrial uses of the plant and how it touches on so many industries, whether it's being used as a replacement for plastic or as toilet paper or as animal feed, or even the seeds and the hemp seed oil being used as human food. There are so many applications of the hemp plant. We're not going to touch on that. We did speak about that in our previous webinars, but just to say that it's a rapidly growing industry, and it's now legal as a tradable entity and as a new asset class, and it's legal now in South Africa medicinally and industrially. South Africa is a powerhouse for the cultivation and has been for many, many generations. In fact, 1/3 of the world's cannabis comes out of the Southern African region. We have unique landrace strains, meaning that they've been here for hundreds, if not thousands of years. They're acclimatized to our conditions. They grow very well here, and they've got unique cannabinoid profiles that are showing great promise when it comes to their medical efficacy and their benefit across a range of chronic conditions. We've got a fantastic climate, and really South Africa is one of the best places to grow it. Cannabis loves Africa, and Africa loves cannabis. In fact, Nigeria was just announced as one of the greatest users of cannabis across the globe. Obviously, with our rand-based costs and our dollar-based revenues, on the cannabis front, it's particularly exciting because it is it's already a global tradable commodity, and we are a very mature export country. We've got a strong established export capability and infrastructure, and the government is very much getting behind both the hemp and the medicinal side of the industry, and this industry can create significant jobs. I'm now going to hand over to Pierre, who will take us through the value chain, and then we can start to unpack and look at some of the opportunities that we're looking at.
Thanks, Cliff. I'm going to be very brief on this in the beginning as an introduction. Just to remind you, we've done a couple of these webinars. If you need any more detail, please go back. They're available on our website and on our social media pages. Okay. We also got quite a few people tonight, so please feel free. I see no questions coming through. We don't have a lot of people, so please participate and we'll talk a little bit about it. The reason we did this webinar is we got a lot of questions about who we're actually going to invest in. So really what we're going to do is invest in the cannabis stroke hemp value chain. Now, there are a number of elements in the value chain. Cultivation, we're going to talk about one or two cultivation companies, and I'll come back with a little bit more detail about cultivation because it's an area of a lot of interest to a lot of people. Then we're going through processing, testing, manufacturing, distribution, and services. So as the product is refined from the plant, it ends up in a final product in a retail environment. Again, we're going to look at each of these areas. We've got a couple of companies we're going to talk a little bit about, and then we'll come back to these verticals and explain a little bit more about why we believe an internal rate of return of 20% is imminently achievable in this industry. Okay, so we'll go on to the next thing. We'll talk a little bit about the fund's focus. And let's delve straight into a couple of examples because that's really what a lot of people want to hear about.
Just before we do, I do want to set the context that these are companies that both Pierre and I have been engaging with over the last few months and that we're aware of. We are not necessarily making investments in them. We're just putting them forward as examples of types of companies that we would engage with. We haven't put them through our investment criteria. We also haven't done a due diligence on them. They're simply parties and entities and companies that we have identified with great potential. So we would like to put them through the process, and it's just to give you a feel for who and what is actually out there in South Africa. And just to touch on what Pierre was saying around the fund focus, obviously we're looking for scalable companies that are defendable, that are already adding value and that are already in existence, but that doesn't mean that we won't invest in seed stage businesses, but I don't think that'll be the norm. The norm, we're aiming for businesses that are already established. Okay, so in terms of the investment strategy and the target returns, I don't think we necessarily covered this enough in our previous webinars, but to summarize it, we are looking at an IRR of 20% plus. We think that we will achieve greater than that, but we really wanted to take a conservative approach and aim for a prudent return. Initially, there won't be dividends for the first year. We really feel it's too early at this stage for a dividend payout, but certainly as these companies mature and move into profitability, there will be dividends paid out. There's great potential for really, really solid and exciting returns in this industry. It's a global market. In terms of the criteria that we are using to evaluate these companies, primarily it's about backing the people on the horse. Obviously, the horse has to be able to stand on its own legs, and the model has to make sense for the business, but we really are very much focused on the executor, the operator, and how they can execute.
Yeah, can I just come in there, Cliff? The one interesting thing about cannabis is we're at the bottom of a very steep growth curve. It's a new industry, and it's destined to be one of the biggest industries, if not the biggest industry in the world. So because of its very nature, most of our businesses do not have 5-year profit history and cash flow, which would be, you know, some funds, that's what they say as a minimum. So we will be looking at relatively new companies. We are not averse to startups, but obviously we're looking for the leader in their vertical. So this may be seen as a slightly higher risk profile, but the other side of that coin is your returns are spectacular. If you're a business in the cannabis industry and you're good in your vertical, or you're good at the business, you may be new, but as the industry goes, you should provide really solid and super profits in a way, because the industry itself is on the cusp of phenomenal growth.
Okay, so to look at some of our opportunities, the reason they're spanning multiple parts of the value chain is that some of these companies have licenses both to cultivate and to manufacture, and some of them have taken it all the way through to end user consumer products. Again, as I said, these are just examples of companies that we've identified and are chatting to, and we're going to dive into a little more detail on some of the key ones within this value chain. We're going to start off by focusing on cultivation. Obviously, a lot of the action is around cultivation and licensed facilities. Licenses started to be issued late last year, and those are licenses issued by the Health Regulatory Authority that entitles those parties to grow and to process into products, and also to export. So it's for local supply into the value chain as well as to export. And we're going to start off with Druids Garden, which is a company based here in Gauteng. They've got a license to cultivate, process, and manufacture. They're looking for funding for additional equipment and to scale up their operation, to upgrade their drying facilities. They're already operating. In other words, they've got plants in the ground. And without the cultivation side of things speeding up tremendously, we won't be able to get further down the value chain in terms of testing and extraction, because obviously, you know, those facilities require significant biomass and plant material to be put through those machines in order to produce end product. The end product that we see on the market right now in terms of CBD, which is legal as a Schedule 0 substance, as a medicine, or Schedule 4 if it's above certain doses, most of those products are being produced with imported CBD. So as these cultivation operations come online and then get into the extraction side of things, we will have a local supply and a shortened value chain. It's crazy that we're growing the stuff here, yet importing the extracted cannabinoids. So Druids Garden is a very exciting, small, organically grown operation. We believe that they've paid a lot of school fees and have come a long way over the last 2 years. And in fact, they are training and assisting other cultivators in terms of their operations, as well as working very closely with the health regulator to get these other cultivation operations up to speed. So they are a front runner. They've done a lot of work. They have an offtake agreement in place with a pharmaceutical company from abroad. And they also have end products that they've produced, which are currently available in a number of retail stores. Our next opportunity that we're looking at is a consumer brand. It's actually at the opposite end of the value chain because there's a lot of trade happening. There are retail stores specific to cannabis that have opened up across the country. I'm involved in a brand and a chain of them, and there are products being produced, innovative products across the spectrum, from CBD oils to cosmetics, food supplements, fitness and wellness. There's a big focus on that, and this is a company that's particularly strong in that area. In fact, they've already got 40 unique products that they've brought to market. They're in over 50 stores, mostly in Gauteng, so they are looking to expand nationally as well as internationally. And if we do make an investment in this company, obviously we will, through our extensive networks, both Pierre and myself, as well as the rest of our board members, we will open doors for them locally and internationally and try and scale them up as quickly as possible. They are looking to appoint a distributor locally, and the funds that they're looking for will significantly help in their marketing efforts, both online and offline.
Dasha Corporation is a very, very exciting business. It's very similar to Druid's Garden in that they are fully vertically integrated company. You'll see on the picture there, they've got wine. So they've got a couple of consumer brands. They are also establishing cultivation operations, which is interesting. And I'm going to talk a little bit generically about cultivation in a minute. But one of the very interesting things about Dasha is they've just put in an offer to buy a decortication factory. Now, the big issue around hemp is we're waiting for the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development to start issuing the permits. And that's great, and hopefully a lot of small farmers will get permits, and we've been told it's going to be as easy as getting a car license. But the biggest challenge there is, where do you sell your product? So if you're cultivating for industrial use, in other words, hemp for industrial use, you need a factory to take that plant and turn it into a usable form of fiber. And Dasha Corporation has now purchased, or is in the process of purchasing, a factory in Winterton. And this is super exciting for the industry, because now we're starting to get investments up the value chain in terms of processing. And then the final part of it is they've got a lot of, they've got offtake agreements, and that's where you earn your revenue. So an exciting business. If we move on to the next slide, I want to talk about, I'm going to come back to cultivation, but if we move on to the next slide, one of the other interesting companies is a company called Chiba Africa. Now, there are a number of companies in this training area that we're talking to, and Chiba have got a 2-day webinar tomorrow. And I encourage everybody, if you've got any interest in cannabis, attend their webinar. They put together a 2-day webinar with 50 speakers. They are launching on Saturday in a campus in Gauteng, a full-blown campus. And behind that, they've got a whole lot of online courses. So this is a really interesting company, a dynamic team. They've got some fantastic ideas about generating content, both for education and then turning it into an education kind of media platform. Yeah, so this is an extremely exciting business that's up and running and generating revenues, demonstrating that they can reach audiences, and they've got a following. They've already sold some online courses, and they're about to launch their physical presence. So a very exciting business in a very exciting area. So one of the verticals we spoke about was the services one. And again, we can talk a little bit more about that later, but this is the kind of company that doesn't really touch the plant, but is deeply embedded in the cannabis industry. Exciting company.
And also just to say around Chiba that they are certified with the Health Professions Council. So they do have a module for training doctors on the medical benefits of cannabis and the endocannabinoid system. And they also have a CETA accredited agricultural or cultivation course. So that's a fantastic feather in their cap. And then they have the agency for a range of cannabis related sex products, which is one of the best selling brands in the US that they are now bringing into South Africa. Okay, so those are some of the companies that we're looking at. As I think I mentioned right up front, we are getting a lot of people approaching us with their business plans and with their opportunities. And obviously we will feed those through our investment criteria and our investment filters. They do need to be put through a process, the companies, of evaluation that, you know, obviously highlights their readiness for investment. And those companies that are closer to the seed stage, that are pre-revenue, we would look to put into an incubator that we are setting up. where they can get subsidized facilities and networking opportunities, and we can gear them up to put into the due diligence investment process. I've also got a question coming through, so I'm just going to take it here quickly. Are any of these companies exporting their products? None of the ones that we've put up today as potential investment opportunities are exporting that I'm aware of, but there are companies that are exporting CBD products into Asia, and there's a coffee company, the company that produces CBD infused coffee that we're speaking to, that has just listed their products on Amazon, based in Cape Town.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about the team, and then we'll go back to the value chain and pick it up there. If you look at this slide and all our previous marketing collateral, there are a couple of new faces, and we're very pleased to announce that we've got 2 people who are going to join our investment team, and our chairperson has finally been released from her legal obligations, and we are very delighted to have Peggy Sukumalo as the chairperson of the board. Sibs, you've met before. He facilitated one of our webinars. Strong background in cannabis, especially on the consulting side, and Jody is one of the leading guys. We have spoken about him in a previous webinar. So the team's expanded. So just to be clear, we are still open to lots of different proposals. So I'm going to talk a little bit generally about the value chain again. If we talk about cannabis cultivation, I'll give you some very broad numbers. Currently, if you're a decent grower and you build an operation with 3 tunnels, I'm going to use some very generic numbers. Now, this is at risk of being shot down. Because you can have a facility for 450 million. We have one in Southern Africa, and you can build a facility for 20 million and have a very successful business. But let's just choose a small facility in the cultivation of medical grade cannabis. Let's assume it costs 20 million rand to build, and you build a 1,000 square meter facility. The next step in the equation of what kind of return you're going to get is the quality of your grower. So in the first year, you may get your systems getting set up. But if you've got a really good grower, you should conservatively getting 4 crops a year. If you're doing 4 plants per square meter, you're doing about 1,000, 1,200 plants. If you generate 100 grams per plant, you're doing, now all of these are variables. Okay, you could be doing more plants per square meter and lower grammage. You could be growing longer veg, getting less harvests, or you could be having slightly bigger plants and getting higher grams. But you should be generating at a minimum between 8 to 50 million rand a year. Now, if you think that your capital cost is around 20, your payback period ranges from 18 months, could be even quicker, through to 2 to 3 years. Now, most businesses on a 3-year business plan or a 5-year business plan, you'll start seeing break even in year 3, small profits in year 4, and by year 5, you're pumping it. The cannabis cultivation side is not like that. Now, the one big variable is the price per gram. I've used a very conservative price per gram. There are people out there that valuing their businesses at 200 million rand on 1,000 square meters, and they're saying they're going to get $6 a gram. I think those days are gone. But the key point we're trying to say to our investors is, if you invest in a SAPRA medical quality license, the returns are quite phenomenal. If you really have all the numbers I mentioned, you put them into a spreadsheet, your IRR is way in excess of 20%. So the margins in cannabis are reasonably high. But there are trends in the market and the prices are going down. So it's not a license to print money. It's just a very high margin industry at this point. So we're looking at that. Hemp on the other side, estimated to do 3-4 times the profit per hectare of any other crop, like a maize, a soya. It really depends on the environment, and it very, very much depends on the infrastructure that the farmers already exist. So the barriers to entry licensing-wise are pretty low. We don't know exactly what those rules are. Profitability, again, pretty high. because you're getting serious volumes. But there are a couple of unknowns. Is when will these regulations come out? We're going into winter now. So the earliest time you can really plant is technically in spring. So if you're doing a full season sun-grown crop, technically you're harvesting next year this time. So the hemp is very interesting, low barriers to entry, but the timing then becomes an issue. So we're talking to a whole lot of people who want to farm hemp, and we're really serious about investing in it. But the when and the how much there's a couple of moving parts there. The next step up the value chain, I've touched with Dasha Corporation, where you process the fibers, but in terms of extraction from cannabis is an interesting market. A lot of markets, they want derivatives, and they don't really want to buy flour or floss. So there's a big market for extraction. We've got a serious shortage of extraction companies in South Africa, but there's quite a few very exciting companies that have a vision of busy being set up. Again, if you want to do, crude oil extraction, your capex is low. If you want to do isolates and distillates, and you want to get, you want a really high quality end product, you're going to have to throw more money at the capital side, but then your value per processing or the end product goes up phenomenally. So extraction is a very exciting area.
In fact, Pierre, sorry if I can just interrupt you there. We've got another question which is very relevant to what you're saying. That is our cannabis industry going to be like our mining industry, where we're just exporting the raw product? Yeah, so just to talk to that, it's absolutely tragic. In Nigeria, they dig the stuff out of the ground, send it elsewhere to be processed, and then buy the petrol back. We definitely want to avoid that situation in South Africa, where the international market turns us into farmers of this product. We absolutely have the skills and the knowledge and the technology here in the country to process it right through to high quality end product, and then to export that product. So it's just a question of timing. You don't have, if you have the extraction facility set up and you have no plants in the ground, it's problematic because those businesses and their burn rate. But as soon as we've got the plants in the ground and the extraction plants are ready and the processing plants, as long as those dovetail reasonably well, and I think they will, because we've seen quite a lot of activity on both fronts, we should be able to shorten the value chain and produce the distillates and the isolates that are necessary to produce the medical products that are starting to already appear in these retail stores that we spoke of. And then there's another question around, are there possibilities of franchising the retail outlets?
Can I go back to that previous one? Because I think it was a very good question. So here's a dilemma. We do not want to be turned into raw material suppliers as a concept. However, cultivation globally it's driving the price down. We are blessed with sun. Cultivation, the plant grows naturally. Cliff's covered that. So we must build our expertise in cultivation, because that's our USP. That's our source of long-term advantage. And in a weird kind of way, the lower the prices in terms of cultivation, the better for us. One of my opinions is we're competing with South America. We're not competing with Canada. They can't compete. They've got a lot of snow. Most of it's very high cost. I think even in America, they'll prevent imports to protect their industry, but their cost of production is high. We've got companies like Colombia. There's a whole list of them in South America. And I think what we should do is own cultivation, but we mustn't own it to the expense of beneficiation and value add. The other reason we need to own cultivation is it provides job creation and it fuels the industry from the bottom. And this is a very important aspect in our country that is unique to our country. We have to generate jobs. The Indian Hemp Association launched and within a year created 90,000 jobs. Now that is what South Africa needs right now. So cultivation is something we should really work on. And we should perfect, and we should become world leaders in cultivation. But we've got factories in East London, which is in the center of the Dachau belt, where hemp is imported from the Netherlands and put in the door panels of Mercedes and BMW cars. Now, that is just crazy. We need to beneficiate and we need to add value. And South Africans are quite innovative and we will do that, but we need to build the value chain. So very good question and a bit of a tricky answer to that one. But ultimately, just to summarize, build our expertise on cultivation, become the best low-cost producer in the world, and the supplier, and build the industry en masse, generate jobs, and then beneficiate and export the value-added products. The other benefit we've got is we've got the whole of Africa at our doorstep. Zimbabwe's coming online, Zambia's coming online, Lesotho's online. There's also the African market. There's 1 billion people in the African market. If we could create, for example, a low-cost painkiller or medicine, low-cost medicine, and it can benefit the people of Africa, there's a homegrown market with a homegrown product, and that's just a wonderful outcome.
Great. And then just to get back to that question, are there possibilities of franchising the retail outlets in the short term? Yes, there definitely are. I'll get in contact with you. We are not in the process of franchising right now in terms of the company that I'm involved in called Taste of Cannabis, but it's definitely on the radar, and we'll pick that up offline.
Can I talk a little bit about manufacturing? Because it extends beyond extraction and hemp processing. And this is again in your area. We need to develop manufacturing for delivery mechanisms. When I talk about that, I'm talking capsules, I'm talking pills, I'm talking suppositories, I'm talking vapes, various edibles, various delivery mechanisms. Again, we've got a very highly developed and skilled manufacturing sector with a low cost base. So we need to go to the Department of Trade and Industry, we need to provide some incentives, and we need to boost our manufacturing side for both the local market and for export. So there's a very interesting area around manufacturing. If you listen to a lot of the politicians, they talk about job creation through industrialization. And that is a key strategy of government, and cannabis again, cannabis and hemp can add huge impetus to job creation in the manufacturing sector.
Okay, sorry, Pierre, I'm just going to jump across to that last slide about why SilverLeaf before we take one more question. Okay, we've got a question here around the 12J tax incentive being phased out, and also in terms of the government legislation, are they very supportive of this industry? I don't know which one you want to tackle. I'm happy to do either.
Yeah, okay. Well, far away. I'll do the one you don't do.
Okay. So yeah, in terms of the 12J tax incentive being phased out, the implications for this fund are that if you invest literally within the next 2 days, you get the tax break for this financial year, and then you've still got the run for 2022 in that there's the provisional tax that has to be submitted before June of this year. So both the 2021 and 2022 years, you'll be able to get the tax break, and thereafter the sunset clause will have kicked in and the tax break will no longer apply, but the fund will very much still be going. And if anything, we will look to scale up the quantum and to continue growing the fund and looking at many more investments. Just won't be the tax break.
So the most important message about the announcement today by the Minister of Finance is write your check before Friday. Otherwise, you're not going to get this tax break. So there's 2 elements to our fund. 12J, you get a tax break, it boosts investment, and the other one are the underlying investments. If you don't believe in cannabis, you shouldn't be investing in our fund. But if you do believe in cannabis, the underlying investments are the key criteria, and the tax deduction just adds impetus to that. So invest before Friday is the message. If you miss that boat, you can still get the tax deduction if you invest before the end of June, but it'll only be in next year's tax return. If you invest before Friday, you get the tax break right now. Yeah. So if you need to know where to do that, please just go to our website or mail us on invest@silverleafinvestments.co.za. But the easiest thing, go to the website. It's all there. If you've got any questions, just hit the contact form or hit the invest. There's a button for invest at, and we'll respond in the next 48 hours. But you've got to move.
Okay, and the next question is government legislation really going to support this industry? The rest of Africa seems to be absolutely against legalization, and the legalization of the industry seems to be a slow process.
Yeah, I can jump in there. Yes, we started slowly. There is no question about that. We've had a lot of issues in government, especially with, you know, the policies are right, but the implementation has been a little bit lagging. And we've had some delays because of COVID, but we seem to be getting into second breath now, and the licenses by SAPRA are being issued. That's starting to get some momentum. We're waiting for guidance from the Department of Agriculture for the hemp licenses or permits. That should give us huge momentum. We're one of the only countries in the world where it's legal for private use, and that's what's been dominating the debate. And there's been a lot of unhappiness about the cannabis bill. It is a dreadful document, okay? And it is in the emotive area of the market, with people getting arrested and that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, that's been the dominant narrative in the media, when the real narrative should be, this is a fantastic industry based on legal, medical and other uses, industrial uses, and that's what's going to generate jobs and returns. So, you know, we're all frustrated, and it's taken a long time to get where we are, but we really believe that this is the time we bottom of the growth curve, and that's the very reason why we launched SilverLeaf Fund. One of the reasons was that they lacked a credible investment vehicle for investors to enter this industry. So that's why we've got the fund, and we believe the timing is now. Yeah, this issue about targeting Black cannabis entrepreneurs, absolutely critical issue in our country, and needs to be addressed, and it will be a criteria. However, we are not the government, and the government needs to come to the party. We got a question in our last webinar, are we going to fund small rural farmers? And the answer is we would love to, but our first obligation has got to be to the people who give us money. So I hope that we move away from this, this racial debate, and we fuel an industry from the bottom by generating jobs in the rural areas. If we do that, we can build an opportunity for all our people, everybody. And obviously, we're not ignoring the history of the country, and BEE and transformation is critical in our thinking, but really that will rest in the qualifying companies. And I must say, I've never seen a proposal in this industry where BEE and transformation is not addressed in some form. Some of us have set up foundations, and I'm not going to go into this whole area around this industry, but there's a lot being done in that area. There is no question about that.
Great, and then we've got one last question. Why do you have to remain in the fund for 5 years, and how do you exit? So the structures and rules around 12J are such that you have to be in the investment for the 5-year period. You can exit early, but then there are penalties. And in terms of how you exit, there are a number of options. There's possible trade deals, M&A, management buyouts are an option also, and potentially, you know, if we build a substantial fund, there's also an opportunity for an Alt-X listing in time to come. Great, so just to summarize again, going to go back one slide, why SilverLeaf is a fantastic vehicle. And it really is that we've set the foundation. It's a registered venture capital company. It falls under the Financial Services Act. And Jeff Miller from Grovest is our compliance officer. Daryl Weiss, just going to take you very briefly through the team. Daryl Weiss comes out of the FMCG space and is from the corporate world. He was there for 30 years as the MD of Nampak Tissue and the sales and marketing director for Kellogg's. Then Mr. Paul Bacher, very experienced businessman, a serial entrepreneur. He's exited multiple companies and has spent the last few years in the non-profit sector, He was responsible for the birth of an organization called the National Mentorship Movement, which matches mentors and mentees and companies that need assistance.
One of the examples of the skill set where we're going to drive the transformation agenda and assist people. So, yes, sorry to interrupt you.
Absolutely. And then Peggy Sue is head of wealth management at Standard Bank, and brings obviously that depth of experience. And then we've partnered with Shinders when it comes to the legal side of things, and as I mentioned, GrowBest, who are the managers and administrators of the 12J Fund. If there's anything else that you'd like to add, I think that's most of the things we wanted to cover.
To wrap up now, so to the participants out there, if you've got any other questions, ask us. We're happy to chat. Just the one last thing, you've got 2 days. Go to our website, download the application form, fill in the mandate form as per the instructions. If you've got any questions, you send an email to us. Either Cliff, myself, or Daryl will contact you. We've been on the phone to many people. So this is the last chance to utilize the tax deduction. Well, the second last chance, as we said, there's another chance in June, and we encourage you to support us. The more money we get in, the more money we can invest in this exciting industry.
Great, thank you very much for attending. As Pierre said, if you have got any questions, please.
There's one more. Okay, so how big is the industry globally? Let's talk a little bit about our history here. In Canada, they've got listed companies, they're fully legal. There's a number of other countries around the country where cannabis, particularly in medical, is fully legal. The American momentum is unbelievable. Today, New Jersey, now to put it in context, New Jersey's next to New York. So there's a huge population that comes with New Jersey and legalization. I can't remember how many states now, it's probably 20 odd. With various levels of legalization. So you have medical legalization and you have adult use. Some have done medical, some have done adult, or done both. The industry, the prediction for next year is 40 odd billion US dollars. And the prediction is a phenomenal growth rate, I think in excess of 25%, going up to 100 million US dollars. And that excludes the exciting new industry potential of that may take a while out of hemp like biofuel. So the industry is huge and it's going through massive growth. Is this really going to be a major growth category? Absolutely. Yeah. Hint, it's currently 30 billion and expected to grow to 75 billion, and those numbers have actually gone up. It depends who you talk to, and that is, yes, absolutely correct. That's the legalized size of the market. The illicit market, it's difficult to put a number on it, but I think cannabis legal versus illicit in Canada is now 50-50. I think only recently, after many years of fully legal, is the legal industry now just surpassed the size of the illicit industry. So those numbers I spoke to you, you can double them if you want to include the illicit industry. By the way, in South Africa, it's very, very important for us to include the illicit industry, because many of those are small farmers in areas like the Transkei and some of the neighboring countries. And they really need to be brought into the fold and included in the industry.
And just on that point, one of the companies that we are looking at in this process is a company that has a mobile extraction lab, which will be particularly relevant for what Pierre's talking about, where that extraction lab can drive around that region. People bring their produce either to a cooperative hub or to where that facility is, and the cannabinoids will get extracted from the biomass that they've cultivated in the region.
Yeah, without going into a history lesson, the top 3 medicines in the United States in the early 1900s was cannabis number 1, cannabis number 2, and I think the third one was then aspirin. It was the most widely used product. If we go back centuries before that, hemp produced all the cordage, which is the sails and the ropes which powered up the ships. So the fact that we as a generation know very little about cannabis is a complete anomaly. It's been a revered industrial plant and a medicinal plant and even a spiritual plant over many, many, many years. So really what we're doing, we're almost at the position of the end of prohibition of alcohol. And we saw what happened to that. Cannabis will assume its rightful role as a massive industry. And we hope to lead that and provide returns for our investors when that actually happens.
And it's an incredible plant that has ecosystem implications as well, because it sequesters carbon and it remediates the soil. So there is that whole angle to it as well. And a lot of people don't know it's a plant that grows within 4 months, 5 months at the outset to maturity. And you can produce paper from it. So if you compare that to the forests that are required and how long it takes for those to grow, for just the paper industry alone, the implications are huge. And then Pierre touched on biofuel, plastics and packaging. It also degrades quite quickly. So those are very exciting.
And by the way, it can stop climate change and save the world. But
we're very passionate about the plant and the industry and what can come out of it. And we just wanted to say thank you very much for your time this evening. And we hope that you come on the journey with us and that you invest in SilverLeaf. Now is the time.
Thank you very much for attending our webinar. And please stay in touch. We will be doing this again.
Thank you. Good evening.